Very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers. It's an afternoon somewhere, an evening somewhere, but it's a pleasure always to have you join us around this time every Friday, same time, same place, when we discuss the issues at hand that are worth probably sharing and ensuring that the public gets a deep understanding on some of these issues of national concern. Welcome to Acfim Talks, your host, Felix Kafuma. And today we are discussing Uganda, a nation choking on loans. This Friday, the 4th. It's a happy new month, and I should say happy new month. Before we start, because I'll be joined by two distinguished guests to make sense of this conversation. But before we start, like it's my practice, I usually take a minute to first welcome all of you who are joining us, but also encourage everybody out there to be part of this discussion. We are live on Facebook, on Twitter, and also on YouTube. On Facebook, we are live at Acfim UG, on YouTube, Acfim UG, and Twitter. Our handle is at Acfim UG. You can be part of this conversation, sending your comments and also your questions if you have any, and then you can enrich the discussions. And that said, today we want to take a detour and look at Uganda and where we stand in terms of our public debt, but also what does the future hold? You and me, and probably the unborn, what kind of country are we going to leave behind? Just been having a discussion back end with the panelists I'll be introducing in a short while. But he left behind a question before I came on set. What kind of country, you and me, are we going to leave behind for our generation to come? And there's no better time than discussing that question now. And we look at Uganda, a nation. Is it a nation choking on loans? And where are we coming from? Just to give a little bit of a background, if you've been following in the news, in the national news, Parliament yesterday approved a loan of 1.7 trillion Uganda shillings, which apparently government is going to get from Standard Chartered Bank and other financial institutions to finance development and infrastructure. So in a nutshell, we are getting what I would call a commercial loan, not a concessional loan. And although there have been protests from some of the members in the House, in the 11th Parliament, where majority are from the opposition, that have looked at this loan to be not a palatable loan for Uganda, with high costs, and apparently more of a commercial loan as opposed to a concessional loan. Government has gone ahead and secured an approval from Parliament that is majority the National Resistance Movement MPs. Already, as we stand, Uganda's public debt stock stands at shillings 79 trillion, and I must also add, at 79 trillion, we are struggling to pay our creditors as a country. So the newly approved loan will now bring Uganda's debt portfolio to Uganda shillings 80.7 trillion. If you add the 79 plus the 1.7, yes, and that will mean we would have increased our percentage of loan to more than 23%, from 69.5 trillion by the end of 2020-2021 financial year to current. So that 1.7 trillion loan that we are going to get from Standard Chartered and other financial institutions that are not yet named is going to increase our domestic debt to 32.4 shillings in terms of trillion shillings, from 30.7 trillion shillings as of financial year 2020-2021. And this comes at the heels when President Museveni also, while having a meeting with the members of the Uganda Bankers Association, warned against excessive internal borrowing. So as the Uganda's As Uganda's public debt continues to soar, with no signs of slowing down amidst the skyrocketing mismanagement of public affairs, remember that the IG's report released last year, October, reported that Uganda loses approximately 20 trillion to corruption through procurement and budgeting, among others. Remember, we are talking about getting a loan and our debt portfolio, but on the other hand, we are looking at the hemorrhage of public resources through corruption. So in today's episode, we take a detour to understand the implication of the growing debt burden and what does the future hold for Ugandans, me and you out there who's listening. What does this mean? Welcome once again to Acfim Talks. And with me, I've been joined by two gentlemen. Let me start with Charles. Charles is on set. Charles Mulozi Olwen, who is the public policy analyst and a human rights defender. Charles currently works with the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. AFSA. Charles, it's good to have you for today's Acfim Talks.
Pleasure joining you, Felix, and the team of Acfim.
Great. I expect to have Moses Mushime, who is a lawyer and an economist. Moses has been on this show before. He should be joining us. He's the current executive director of Open Health Network and also a partner with Chibuka Rashid and Company Advocates. When he gets on set, I will introduce him again. But as we wait for Moses to join us, I think we can kick it off since I have Charles. If for those who don't know, Charles is also an activist. In his other world, is an activist, and I believe once an activist, always an activist. Yes, Moses, it's good to have you. I can see you are on set.
Thank you.
I did introduce you. I can hear you very well. I did introduce you in your absence, and it's glad always to have you. Hope you've been well.
I've been well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Great. Let's pick this up, and let me start with you, Charles. I'm so sure you've been following the recent trophy of 1.7 in terms of our debt. We've added on something on our debt portfolio, so we've grown our debt portfolio to 80.7 trillion as it stands now. So let's say that we Ugandans, we are accustomed to the behavior of borrowing, and just want to pick your thoughts here. What are your thoughts? First of all, is it justifiable? Is it necessary for us to have this loan? Like I said, there are those who have argued that this loan is not good for us. But what are your thoughts on this loan?
Hi, Felix, and the team of Acfim, viewers and listeners, good morning. Thank you so much for hosting me and also inviting me to share my opinions with the Ugandans. When we talk about debts, the debts question in Uganda is part of the bigger governance question in this country, because debt is part of the bigger governance questions. And also to underscore the most important aspect, like every country is borrow. But the countries which borrows, they borrow for certain reasons. They just don't borrow for consumptive, and they don't borrow for buying tear gas. They don't borrow for refunding what they call wrong kind of borrowings to service the debts. You borrow to service the debts. So people borrow for very strategic reasons. And as I said, the governance question in this country is not very different, because debt is a symptom. Excessive debt is a symptom of a very poor state, a poor governed state. And for me, that's where we need to start from. And this question, as for long, has been left to politicians to decide. So most citizens in this country decided to take the back seats and allow politicians to run the show. And these conversations, institutions like Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, the Uganda Debt Network, most of these institutions, Action 8 International Uganda, the Anti-Corruption Coalition, have been raising these eyebrows that states, look, to borrow money, there are a number of systems that we need to talk, and I need to build from this, Felix. when I talk about governance, that governance is in terms of putting a system, institutions, individual, and the structures that can hold individual accountable. But in the last 3 to 4 decades, the system of this country is left to individual, and individual determine what is right and what's wrong. And this right and wrong can only be defended by that same individual or group of individuals. I always call them economic hitmen. And I've made it a number of times that the people who borrow and the members of parliament who are defending and they've approved this loan, are they first citizens of this country? Because if you're a citizen of this country, you know that the kind of the life and the decisions we are taking, it has a severe implication in terms of the future of this country, but also the development trajectory of this country. So there are two things I need to talk about very, very kind of in line with your question. First of all, this loan and any other loans, which has amount to 80.7 million. It is completely unnecessary because there is no justification. The parliament yesterday made a very strong argument that there's some amount of money, over 80 plus billion, has been given to individuals in this country. There's number of trillions has been given to individuals in this country to run their projects. So I think the question of borrowing in this country has become, it is at individual wish. If someone feel like I need to do this, I need to go and run and borrow. So let me end with this and allow Moses to come in 3 important aspects that we need to know. The kind of loans that we borrow is going to have implication on 3 important aspects. One, the quality of the public service. As we talk right now, the public service system in this country is dysfunctional. The entire public service is dysfunctional. I saw him, President Yoweri Museveni Kagota was fighting about the theft in the National Drug Authority. Like our drugs now in DRC, in West Africa, in Southern Africa, and we are servicing the entire East and Southern Africa. I heard him talking about a number of processes in this country. So we cannot talk about all this borrowing if we don't deal with corruption. And the corruption has been part and parcel of the survival mechanism of the current regime. In the last so many years, they've been part of they are being in government. So therefore, if you have a system of governance which is unaccountable, debts become part of a survival because the service delivery is not working, the economic system is working. Almost 75% of Ugandans are struggling to eat. Therefore, you cannot raise taxes to service and manage the appetite for the money that we need to sustain this country. And this followed with a dysfunctional education system. So the broken society that we have, that has been created in the last 30 years plus, it is a manifestation that loan become inevitable. And this inevitability of loan is just not about today, but they say, let's do it what Pepsi says, live for now. So we have individuals who are in position of government policy, in government institutions, that they're actually living for now. And the question is, do they have children? Based on the question you've asked earlier, what kind of country are we living to these people? So it is incumbent upon me and you and the elites who are part of this country to avoid the French Revolution of the 1789, whereby the elites became the problem. So we need to reflect and ask ourselves, what kind of country are we going to leave to the citizens and to the children that is going to come after us? We need to join hands and push back and make sure that we remove politicians out of the circles and make sure that we start putting system, institutions, and policies that can hold individuals accountable, and probably this kind of loan can be avoided in future. Thank you.
A little bit of breaking up there. Just losing you, but it's okay. I think I got your point, and I'm going to come back to you on that one, on the issue of what kind of borrowing are we having as a country, because on many occasions, the argument has been that you are borrowing because you have a shortfall in financing your budget. But remember, you have a shortfall in financing your budget, but you have a leakage of 20 trillion annually to corruption, almost half of your annual budget. Quite interesting. Uganda is. Moses, you are an economist. Help us make sense of this loan, because for me, first of all, is it necessary? Is it justifiable? But why are we going for a commercial loan as opposed to a concessional loan? And what's wrong with this? Let's look at the 1.7 before even we look at our bigger debt portfolio. What is wrong with this particular loan of 1.7 trillion, or what is right with it?
I can tell you, for all intents and purposes, there is nothing right with this loan. First of all, in a period such as this, where there is a slowdown in economic growth, where we are even bordering a recession, there is no way why a country like Uganda would go for a non-concessional loan, for example. We know, for example, this loan from the Standard Chartered Bank, it has what they have called guarantor fees. They have agency fees because the agency, in fact, the Standard Chartered Bank is not the bank that is going to give the loan. It is an agency, it is the mediator. In a more simplistic way, it is a broker, it is doing brokerage. This money is coming from other financial institutions, and this one is going to manage. Now, why wouldn't, for example, a country go direct to those people? Because they are going to pay agency fee of 15,000 euros per year. They are going to pay guarantor fees, and they are going to pay contingency fees. The grace period is just 4 years. 4 years is just days away from today. But there are loans, for example, from other multilateral lending institutions like World Bank, like IMF, where you have a grace period of over 10 years with zero interest rate sometimes, or even interest rate that is up to 1%. The interest rate they have told us here is about, depending from which financial institution, is between 2.5 and 3.9. That is very high because there are other concession loans that will get better. But why would, for example, a country Uganda go for this loan? I think, in my opinion, it's because this loan is not conditional. This is money that can be abused, and that is the only motivation. And there are blockers within this arrangement. When you compare to other concession loans that will get, maybe they would say, this money we want it in the health sector. This money we want it in education sector. This, there are no conditions. The conditions is just that Parliament should approve. Attorney General should give an opinion. But they are not saying you want improvement in, for example, delivery of services. We are in a period where there is hike in food prices. This money is not going to go for agriculture. This is money that you can abuse anyhow. And that is very dangerous, Michael. That one I have to tell you. So there is nothing good about this one anyway. In a period like this, where there is slowdown in economic growth, but also where we do not have virtually, I've been told that now public servants are paid in shifts. We are in a period where there is food shortage, lean period. What is the government doing to boost food production? What is our food policy, for example, for this country? So I think we are headed for worse times, and this alone is going to make the situation worse actually.
Wow.
That's what
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Moses. You have been as blunt as it gets, but true, and a patriot as it can be. Let me come to you, Charles. You've had Moses. There is nothing right about this loan, and there's something he has talked about, which apparently, when I come back to the literature about this loan, they have argued that this loan is specifically for it's a commercial loan that is meant to finance development and infrastructure. Remember, it's not conditioned. But when the MPs put to task to the minister to explain what are some of those development projects that you're going to finance using this loan, until now that list is yet to be shared. And then that brings me to the question that I want to ask you, Charles. The terms of the loan, for sure, they are not friendly. It is a commercial loan. So when you read into what Moses has said, why would government push through a bad loan? What could be the underlying interests here?
Thank you, Felix. I first strongly resonate with the submission from Moses. I think he made it, he nailed it just. And that resonate also with the conversation I had with you earlier before this meeting. Like, you know, a country which is run from a speculative point of view, a speculative kind of in a black market. Uganda is run like a black market country. So everything is speculative. And as Moses has rightly alluded, that they are brokers, they are beneficiaries. Before when they go for loan, already know who is taking which share, who is taking what. It's very clear. And in just a difficult time when the citizens, the majority citizens are grappling with basic right to food, we can't talk about development. We have been talking about development in the last 36, 37, 40 years of Museveni's governance. The roads you cannot drive, the electricity mentioned everything. These are these guys. It is development in quote, because the easiest way to persuade, I always make jokes that we are citizens, I think, with the lowest memory capacity, that our memory lasts as long as the topic ends. So as soon as this borrowing ends, everything ends. There's another borrowing and something. So as Moses has rightly stated in his submissions, that there is, first of all, there is no development. There is no development in all this process. There's a whole kind of a plan, a big projects that individuals are running. There's a plan for 2026. That one you don't need to leave it, and that's also the problem. We always talk about symptoms. We don't want to talk about the problem that this country has been grappling with in the last 60 years of independence. The question of politics. The politics is a very important aspect. Everything is driven by politics in this country. The 2026, I come near a village, I don't want to mention that. I see deployments day in, day out. I see a lot of processes. There are individuals already who strongly believe that this country, they know the future, they know the history, they know where it is. They're already planning something up. So there's first no development. At this time, we don't need development fund. We need money that invests in food system, that can stabilize prices, that can invest in agriculture, where majority of the citizens are deriving their livelihood from. So Felix and the great teams of Acfim, we need to, first of all, start picking interest about the governance question about this country, about the political question about this country, in terms of how we're going to start conversations about changing the whole thinking and the mindset of the politicians. I used to have a lot of conversation with the members of parliament. Everything is a commercial in this country. Before a bill is brought in parliament, there are people who have earned a certain amount of money already. As Moses has alluded, he did not mention directly, but he said they are brokers, they are mediators, they are beneficiaries, and all these aspects. And members of parliament have become the easiest traders in this country. They are there for selling and for buying. They are just available for anything available, anything to be picked. So you have a country where there's everything is to be picked. So you, Felix, what are you going to pick from this country? Moses, what are you going to pick? And it's going to be a dangerous kind of trajectory in terms of shaping the governance and accountability question of this country. So as Moses has rightly indicated, there is nothing good for this loan, and nobody should even go ahead to justify and defend it. The question is, how are we going to make sure that we push back? And probably I like the conversation from members of parliament that they need to sue parliament. So can we start some litigation process to make sure that members of parliament, they don't have immunity to trade of this country and sell of this country? So until we all say we are citizens of this country, any loan will need to be consulted, any loan will need to be part and parcel of the conversation, because in any case, he's asked to pay. And that is, for me, is the most important question. And the lastly, to end with, institutions like Standard Chartered Bank, there should be action. There should be action from the citizens, and one of the Ugandans who have account in Standard Chartered Bank. Can we withdraw all our accounts from the Standard Chartered if they want to be part of the people who are going to mismanage and probably destroy this country? I was in Denmark sometime when there was aspect of money laundering in one of the big bank in Denmark. The citizen withdrew all their money. So the question of citizenship, the question about patriotism, which is not taught in the school which Museveni and the team are running, the patriotism and citizenship, we need to stand up and be counted that some of these upheavals need to be defended, and we need to say no for such kind of loan and any other act that will further destroy our governance structures, but also put us very vulnerable in terms of dealing with our future and development trajectory.
Interesting. I usually have some banters with a colleague called Henry Muguzi, and he keeps asking this question: whether do we have citizens in Uganda? He kept referring to citizens, and he usually asks, do we have citizens in Uganda or do we have occupants of a territory? But I'll come back to that at some point, because there's a question around what can we do as citizens. But let's broaden this subject now beyond the 1.7, because this is just one of those many loans, and it's not the last one either. And I was looking at the statistics here between financial year 2019 and 2020 and the financial year 2022 and 2021. Our public debt has increased from 59.1 trillion to 80.7 trillion. That is growing by more than 23%. And that is faster than the growth of our economy. So anybody out there should really get concerned. Then I ask myself, and I'm coming to you, Moses, here, what is the problem when you look at that trajectory of growth in terms of public debt portfolio? But also, what explains this unquenchable thirst for loans? Is it an issue of poor public management, poor planning? What is the actual problem here?
Thank you, Felix. And my colleague pointed out the real problem is a problem of governance and accountability. This country has a domestic resource mobilization strategy put up by the Minister of Finance. We expect our taxation policy to be robust. We expect collection modalities to be robust, so that we mobilize sufficient local revenues to support our budget. But that is not the case. We have good laws, and I can tell you this, across East Africa, when you compare particularly to Kenya and Rwanda, Uganda has the most generous taxation system, where people move out with incentives, with concessions, and they are not paying taxes at all. I can name individual companies if time allowed. Individual companies in mining, in manufacturing, who are not paying taxes, be it corporate tax, be it value-added tax, be it excise tax. They are not paying at all, including the recent EACOP company project that is going to manage all oil exports. They have been exempted from taxes, any form of taxes, for the next 10 years. And research has shown that actually those generous provisions, those exemptions in our taxation and fiscal laws do not attract investment, they do not attract good jobs, they do not improve people's welfare, and that is where the problem is. We need to check our fiscal and taxation laws, but also we need to empower URA to correct and generate, or rather to collect more revenues that will support our budget. Because this is an external loan. We are in a period of exchange rate volatility. Government has not told us how much we've lost since the dollar shoot up in terms of debt servicing and repayment. Those statistics have been kept somewhere. They are not telling us, but I can tell you, if the dollar shot from 3,500 now to 3,800, there is a lot we've lost, because a bigger part of our component, about 63% of our loans, are external loans. So there are risks about them, and this is very, very, very dangerous. In terms of where we are heading, I think we have a fiscal charter policy for the next 5 years. It has told us that we should not borrow beyond 50% of our GDP, nominal GDP. But when you look at the projections that the Minister of Finance has given us, they're expecting our debt to GDP ratio to shoot to about 53% in financial year 2023, 2024, before it oscillates down to about 51 around in 2025, 2026. So there is a big problem. I can tell you that, for example, much as we have a 48 trillion budget, 14%, over 7 trillion, is going to debt reservicing and debt payment. without talking about what they call domestic refinancing, where you borrow here and pay here. So the budget they give us, around 30% of it, that money is not there. 14% is going to debt payment and servicing. About another 16% is going to debt refinancing. So 30% of the budget, not in Ugandan hands, not anywhere you'll get it. And I think it is high time, it is the right time now we tame the appetite for these external loans. Particularly, I don't like this where we do not have a work plan, for example. No one in government, as we talk now, can tell you what this money will do. This money is going to come and it is very vulnerable to abuse. And I can tell you, if we are to track how this money is spent in the next 3-4 years, if we intended to do so, many people would be in jail. Over to you, Felix.
Thank you so much. And that brings us to a short break. Let's break. And then when we return, we'll continue with the conversation. And I will be starting with you, Charles. Let's go for a break.